Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Hello.
Today is Season 5, Episode 9. We're taking a look at the wide receiver position, a group that was virtued into some new ground last season without Antonio Brown, and despite the loss of Ben Roethlisberger, they were hoping to make a big impact in 2019. Some mixed results there. We saw improved play from James Washington, regression from Juju Smith-Schuster, and the emergence of rookie Diontae Johnson in a positive light, but not a whole lot else besides that. What we did see a lot of was Johnny Holton, and probably way too much of him on offense. That problem was rectified when the Steelers outright cut him a few weeks ago. But besides that, the wide receiver room is pretty much intact from what it had in 2019.
Man, it's pretty much the same. You still got Juju, you still got James Washington, you got Diontae Johnson, like you said, the big three from 2019 that contributed the most. And then you still have Ryan Switzer, at least for now. And then, you have a decent room for the most part, and you hope that they'll all perform better with Ben Roethlisberger back, which I think Juju should get better with Ben back. I think he has more of a rapport with him. So I think that overall the wide receivers are looking good for next season. They're looking okay at the least. If Juju can bounce back, your wide receiver room is actually pretty solid.
We have a group here of players that, again, like you said, the top guys are all relatively young. Juju Smith-Schuster is the youngest going into just... Aw. The dog's
gonna be a bad, annoying little one today again.
He just
wants to leave my room, so apologize.
He wants to talk about wide receivers too. He needs his fair.
He wants to complain about Johnny Holton being on the team for all of 2019.
And don't we all? And obviously he is frustrated, like we all were, with the way he played last year. But the collection of young players like Smith-Schuster, Washington, and Johnson, the oldest player is Smith-Schuster from that group, and he's going to be in need of a big bounce-back year. James Washington, this is kind of a big prove-it year for him, and Diontae Johnson really burst onto the scene. There are some talking with the expectation that he actually could become the team's number one wide receiver full-time next season, because if you look at just the raw stats, that is what he was in 2019.
Really? That's something I haven't really heard very often. I mean, it's possible, and I do. I based on what I said about James Washington when he came out, where I thought he would be the best wide receiver in the class, even without knowing when he was going to be a Steeler. I would hope so. That could be a possibility, but I mean, part of me also doesn't, because I mean, I do like Juju still, even though he underperformed last season.
Elsewhere, there's a collection of several different receivers, including Ryan Switzer, who has been on the team for 2 seasons, and Deon Cain and Amara Darboh, who have been on the team for just part of last season. You have the return of Quadri Henderson and a couple other players. As far as the bottom end of the roster guys, do you have any expectations for those players? Cain was the only guy who had any impact last season.
And not really. I don't have high expectations. I figure Ryan Switzer might be cut by the end if the Steelers do draft a wide receiver. And there's a chance that the Steelers double dip at wide receiver in this class. Steelers are known to draft wide receiver really well. They might be able to find 2. And, I mean, one could be an undrafted free agent. You never know. And that Ryan Switzer, to me, is expendable. And then same with, like, Darboh and all that stuff. I think that they're all just guys that just going to be there for camp, and they might not make it any further. But who knows?
What about Deon Cain? He did show a little bit in the limited action he had in 2019.
Deon Cain showed. I'm kind of excited for him to see if he can do a little bit more. But at the moment, I don't have high expectations for him in total. But yeah, I mean, he could show out next year.
With that being the case, we have 9 different wide receiver prospects that we're taking a look at today. This is thought to be one of the deepest wide receiver classes of all time. There were, I believe it was 27 receivers that received a round 3 grade or higher going into this draft. that means that there are a lot of different players that have opportunities to make an impact in this league. And that should be a pretty exciting thing, especially for the Steelers, who are without a first-round pick. You could still get a very high-quality receiver without having a first-round pick. That's why I think receiver is a very legitimate possibility with number 49.
It definitely makes sense. I mean, if you're the Steelers right now, you have most of your bases covered. The only one position that maybe is not covered is going to be your nose tackle, which you have to decide is taking a guy that might only play 40 or 60% of snaps, especially in his rookie season. Is he going to be worth it at 49? Then the Steelers have to decide that. But you might be able to take anything, any position. If wide receiver is the best player available, like that's who we're going to get, should be like the easy choice. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And the Steelers could find themselves in a position where they might be able to find a good guy that falls into their hands at, I think, like 102 as well. So there are certainly a lot of options on the table, and we've got, as I said before, 9 different guys to look at. Just a quick run through my 4 players that I looked at for this podcast. I looked at Justin Jefferson from LSU, Van Jefferson from Florida, Tristan Jackson from Syracuse, and Devin Duvernay from Texas. So those are the 4 guys I'm looking at. Austin, tell me the 5 wide receivers you took a look at for this process, and you feel free to start with your first prospect. I believe you were going to go with Freddie Swain.
I started with Van Jefferson's teammate with Freddie Swain, plays in the slot. Then I looked at Laviska Shenault from Colorado. After him, I looked at Brian Edwards from South Carolina. Then Jalen Reagor from TCU. And then I finished it off with Denzel Mims from Baylor. So I will start with Swain. So starting out with Swain, he is 6 foot and 197 pounds. He came out of high school as a 2-time All-State pick and decided to stay at home in Florida with the Gators. As a true freshman, he played in all 13 games, getting 8 catches for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns, playing through a torn labrum the entire season and getting surgery afterwards. His 2017 season wasn't quite as good as he got to start 4 of 11 games, was only able to get 8 catches for 96 yards and 4 touchdowns. However, one of those touchdown catches was one of Florida's biggest plays of the year, catching the game-winning touchdown against Kentucky in a big comeback win. As a junior, he was able to increase his production a little with 14 catches for 265 yards and 5 touchdowns while not starting any of the 11 games. As a senior, he started 6 of 12 games, leading the team in receiving touchdowns, and also had 38 catches for 517 yards, 4 rushes for 27 yards, and also getting some work on special teams with 14 punt returns for 56 yards and 2 kick returns for 39 yards. So his size and speed is a great combo. Based on his tape, I would have thought his combine 40 would have been faster, but he definitely has the play speed because he looks fast on tape. My favorite thing about him, though, is his elusiveness. Pairing it with his speed, and you see the plays like the touchdown he had against Auburn where he was able to split the middle of the field and go all the way for a touchdown, even though it looked like 2 defenders could have tackled him. He just has that good slipperiness to him. This also makes him a real good option on screens. He's got great initial burst, and he has a second gear if necessary, but a lot of the time he looks like a running back out there on screens because of the way he weaves through traffic. Then I thought his adjustments as a receiver were great. He can drop and cradle underthrown passes, and I saw quite a few times on tape, like the touchdown against Georgia, for example. That play also shows how he can quickly gather the ball and tuck it away, and he has shown reliable, steady hands over the past 2 seasons. Then he is a surprisingly decent blocker for runs and for bunch set wide receiver plays where he wasn't the one getting the screen, which was a pleasant surprise for a littler guy playing out of the slot. That really go back to his looseness really is that he has slick footwork, and this has made him a quality punt return option at the college level. So what's not good about him from his tape, the thing he struggles with most is contested catches. He does a bad job of boxing out the defender to be able to finish. He made a couple catches while being draped in coverage, but no true contested catches in my opinion. All the ones where the defender got up with him, he lost. It doesn't help that he allows for the defender to get into his passing lane pretty easy as well, and doesn't show as much fight against more physical defenders. Then his route running isn't great and it is predictable. He uses the same inefficient hop step in his breaks every time, and a lot of his route running has been described as more style focused because he drifts and coasts a lot, especially out of his breaks. Last 2 things are he doesn't do a good job of selling or faking to get defenders off balance, and he also is shown to be a body catcher, which might turn some teams off. So I actually have a comparison for him. His play reminded me a lot of Doug Baldwin, and when looking at the combine stats, I was surprised by Baldwin's bench press number for a guy known as a solid blocking receiver at the NFL level. He was only able to get 6th at the comp. I don't know if something happened or why Baldwin performed so bad, but Swain didn't perform that bad. Swain was much better than that. But regardless, their low production through their first few years in college, almost identical 40 times. Their elusiveness, their blocking abilities all seem comparable. They also played both out of the slot, of course. So Baldwin at the NFL level wasn't a punt returner, but at college level, he was a punt returner for Stanford as well. But so there's a lot of comparisons there. I saw a lot of Baldwin in. But anyway. Back to Swain, I see a lot of potential in him. I give him a 4th-round grade, but I seem to be higher on him than most. As a lot of people don't even have him ranked. I'm thinking it's because of his low career production. He obviously didn't catch many passes in his first 3 seasons, and even his 4th season wasn't incredible. It was just, at least production-wise, he wasn't the main guy, and that's why. But I see a lot more potential in him than that. It also could be because the ridiculous amount of talent in this class, but my projection is he goes in the 6th round, again, because of the talent in this class. That's already a bargain, but if he goes into the round 7 or even undrafted, that would be incredible to me. I saw a lot of value in it, and I guess it's a risk, like I kind of talked about last cast with Ross Blacklock, how he had good production for 1 season, and Swain's production wasn't anything spectacular. It was decent numbers, but I was still impressed with the quality of the play I saw on tape, even though the numbers weren't that high. So, again, this was Freddie Swain out of Florida. I watched this game versus Auburn in 2019, versus Virginia in 2019, and versus Georgia in 2019, as well as his highlights. Who would you like to talk about first?
Let's stay with the Florida Gators right now, and I'll talk about Van Jefferson, the man who often lined up next to Freddie Swain. Coming out of Florida as a redshirt senior at 6'1" and 200 pounds. A little bit about Van Jefferson. His father was a former NFL receiver for 13 years and is now a coach with the New York Jets. He's a receivers coach there. He's a former 4-star recruit and originally signed on with the Ole Miss Rebels, redshirted in 2015, and was an SEC All-Freshman player in 2016, starting 12 games and catching 49 passes for 543 yards and 3 touchdowns. Then in 2017, he only started 3 games and caught 43 passes for 456 yards and 1 touchdown. Then, upon graduating, he transferred to Florida as a grad student, led the Florida Gators in receiving in 2018 by starting 13 games, catching 35 passes for 503 yards and scoring 6 touchdowns, and did that again in 2019 with 49 catches for 657 yards and 6 touchdowns. So based on the pure numbers that Austin and I have just gone over with Swain and the leading receiver Van Jefferson, it seems like Florida either doesn't throw the ball a lot or spreads it out quite a lot. That's something that I can draw just from that. But the positives from Van Jefferson is the most clear and obvious thing is that his dad gives him those NFL bloodlines, and he's a good teacher since he's an NFL receivers coach right now. As you might expect, Van Jefferson pays attention to details. He's a good route runner, has good change of direction speed, and that allows him to get some good separation against press coverage. He knows how to use his frame and has used that leverage to get free at the top of his route. He's willing and able to work back to throws. He also drew 11 penalties against defenders over the last 2 seasons, including 3 in 1 game, and he is an effective yard after catch player. He's a guy that looks to cause damage when he gets the ball in his hands. Jefferson is naturally competitive and has the drive to continually improve. And I got to be honest, I really liked what I saw on tape. He had a very good game against the national champion LSU Tigers. He caught 2 touchdown passes in very similar fashion with a defender draped on him. He reached out and snagged the ball away from his body and pulled it into his chest and held on for the score. So that was pretty good to see. The negatives with Van Jefferson, though. He never put up big numbers in college. It always felt like there was something more for him to have, but he never broke through. He's also lacking in long speed. He didn't participate in any drills at the combine, but he was not expected to test well at the 40-yard dash, and he's going to be a 24-year-old rookie, so he's lacking in terms of overall upside. How high is his ceiling? That's something that you're not too sure about right now. And he wasn't a big play guy. He only had 4 explosive plays against SEC opponents over the last 2 years. His movements can break down and will become frantic when the play breaks down, so he's not a good broken play type of guy. And he doesn't do a good job of creating space or do a good job fighting for contested passes right now. And he's lacking in catch range, making it hard to catch passes when he's on the move. And he's also not a very good blocker. And I'll talk a little bit about Justin Jefferson later, but there are a few key differences with Van and Justin Jefferson because they do profile as similar players. One thing that sets Van apart, though, is his ability to play on both the outside and in the slot. Justin is going to be primarily a slot guy in the NFL. Van seems like a much more NFL-ready receiver than anyone I looked at in this draft process. His tape impressed me the most, and even though he has a lower ceiling than many of the top-level receivers in this class, I think he might be best positioned to contribute right away, and that's something that you should be looking out for, especially with the Steelers who are in win-now mode. From what I can see, Van Jefferson is being mocked between the 3rd and 5th rounds, and I think that that's pretty accurate. I think he'd be a steal anytime after the 3rd round, maybe even during the late 3rd round. I liked what I saw, but it's understandable given how deep the draft class is if teams decide to err and wait on someone like Van Jefferson because they can take a risk, possibly take a risk and hit a home run, knowing that they could, get a base hit sometime later in the draft with no problem with Van Jefferson. So I really liked what I saw, but some limited upside from Van Jefferson is going to keep him from being one of the top-level receivers, but I still think he's got a good place in this league. So Van Jefferson from Florida, we covered our 2 Gator prospects. Let's move on to Laviska Shenault. Is that how you say that name?
Yeah, Laviska Shenault. He is from Colorado. He is 6'1" and 227 pounds. Shenault had a rough upbringing. Back in 2009, his dad unfortunately died after exiting his vehicle on the side of the highway and getting struck by another car. His mother is lucky to be alive today after surviving West Nile virus after fighting it for a year. Still, the Texas prospect pushed on and helped his high school team win its first ever football state title in his senior season, and then decided to go to Colorado. As a true freshman, he played in 12 games of reserve, getting 7 catches for 168 yards, flashing what would later be a very productive college career. In 2018, he moved right into the spotlight, winning Colorado's MVP, even after only playing in 9 games and starting 8 for his 86 catches for 1,011 yards and 6 receiving touchdowns, while also rushing 17 times and having another 5 touchdowns, making him the only player in the country to have both 5 receiving and 5 rushing touchdowns in the entire country. He was a first-team All-Pac-12 selection as well, as he led the FBS with 9.6 receptions per game and ranked 4th in the nation with 112.3 receiving yards per game. In 2019, he was a second-team All-Conference selection for his 56 catches, 764 yards, and 4 touchdowns in the receiving game, and 23 rushes for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing through 8 starts in 11 games. Despite having a year of eligibility left and not putting up the same numbers he did in his sophomore campaign, Shenault decided to forego his senior season and declare for the draft, and in late February, he got core surgery on an injury nagging him through the season, but he should be all good now. It's only supposed to sideline him for 4 to 6 weeks, and he still participated in the combine in limited fashion, so he should be okay. So what's good about him is he's a versatile wide receiver, while mostly playing the X role, but he has been a big slot receiver as well as the Z, and also lining up and being effective as a wildcat quarterback. I don't know if he offers any throwing abilities, as he never threw when that happened, but at least he has shown to be a solid rusher, and we know how much Fickner, wow, I can't speak, loves the wildcat. Then, when he does get to full speed, he shows a very good combo of size, strength, and speed. I really wanted to see him block more because of his strength. I only saw him block on a few plays, but man, he looks like a grown man out there when he does. He threw some corners around only a few times, but and that typically happens when with your best player. You're not typically having them block, but keeping on the strength, size, and speed, he uses all effectively during the catch, using his big frame and great hand strength to get 50-50 balls, as well as mixing his speed with his strength to run after the catch. He's been shown to surprise defenders with his speed as well. The long wind-up time makes them think they have enough cushion, but once he gets to full speed, he eats that cushion pretty quickly. And he also has shown that he can gather and square to the quarterback as well. to make some last-minute catch base with his great instincts and positioning. He has shown to be an excellent deep ball tracker, and he has sudden hands to be able to grab high-velocity throws on the first and second levels. So, on the bad side of things, with his physicality comes durability concerns. He missed playing time over the last 2 years due to injuries and had multiple surgeries now, having toe and labrum surgery before 2019 and now a core muscle surgery following the 2019 season. And again, with how physical he plays, he takes a lot of heavy hits when he has the ball in his hands. Wasn't that good, and he doesn't get much separation because of it. He already isn't the fastest, but again, his startup speed was disappointing. Then his route running needs some work to be able to catch up with his physical gifts, as he alters his turn length and reveals his intentions when running intermediate routes, and also his route fakes are not very good. Better quarterbacks aren't going to fall for it. Speaking of quarterbacks, I was surprised to see him struggle against bigger quarterbacks. He's a big dude himself, and he is strong. However, he gets forced against the boundary and taken out of plays because of it by these bigger cornerbacks. Last thing is he needs to improve the angles he takes on blocks. Lance Zierlein compared him to Sammy Watkins, but what's funny is I thought of 3 wide receivers without realizing their connection until after thinking about it. Let's see if you will get the connection. He reminded me of a combination of Sammy Watkins, Martavis Bryant, and DeAndre Hopkins. Do you know the connection?
Clemson.
You're exactly correct. They were all wide receivers at Clemson in 2012. They were all on the same team at one point. So Shenault really interested me. He literally was an average of the 2012 Clemson wide receivers in my mind. I feel like he could be the next DeAndre Hopkins, and that's a lot. He has a hand strength, size, and speed Hopkins has, running 0.01 of a second slower than Hopkins did at his 40. The injury history reminded me of Watkins and Bryant, though, and his ability to be an effective runner also reminded me of Bryant. The truth of the matter is Shenault is a boom or bust player. This could be the next DeAndre Hopkins. He could end up being a nobody. I see him as a second rounder coming out, but he might be able to sneak into the late first round just like Hopkins did back in 2013 at pick 27. So that was Laviska Shenault from Colorado. I watched his games versus Oregon in 2019, versus Nebraska in 2019, and versus Colorado State 2019, as well as his highlights. Which prospect would you like to talk about next?
I'm going to take a look at a guy that's much more of a safer selection, and that's going to be Justin Jefferson from LSU at 6'1" and 202 pounds. The junior is the third brother to play for the LSU Tigers. I don't remember his middle brother Ricky, who played safety, but I do remember his oldest brother Jordan, who was the quarterback for the Tigers from 2008 to 2011. His last game being the national championship loss to the Alabama Crimson Tide, which I remember not fondly, but I do remember that game, so I thought that was kind of interesting. He played sparingly in 2017, just 4 games, didn't record any catches, and then jumped out of nowhere to become the leading receiver in 2018 with Joe Burrow at the helm, catching 54 passes for 875 yards and 6 touchdowns in 12 starts, and then got even better, leading the team in receptions again in 2019 with 111 for 1,540 yards and 18 touchdowns on 15 starts, and obviously was a national champion. So Justin Jefferson has a great burst off the line. That's the first thing you're going to notice off tape, and he's a really good athlete. He can make a lot of quick movements in an efficient manner, and he can work around press coverage or traffic over the middle of the field. He's an instinctive pass catcher. He ran a lot of anticipatory and timing routes in college, and he had a noticeable improvement in terms of his drop rate from 2018 to 2019. You can see that his hands got stronger from year to year, and he can snare the ball away from his body, and he does a good job of jumping. He can high point the ball well, and he can make adjustments when the ball's in the air and does a good job of tracking it too. Jefferson also has pretty long arms, which gives him a wide catch radius, and he does a good job of reading coverages. And unlike Van Jefferson, he's a very good run blocker for a receiver his size. He is, I wouldn't call him an asset, but he's definitely a helpful component to a running game. As a matter of fact, they actually lined him up as a tight end at times, which I thought was interesting. And he also came up with a bunch of clutch, big-time third down catches when he was at LSU to extend drives as well. The negatives with Justin Jefferson, though. The offensive scheme, you're going to hear this a lot with LSU players. You've already heard it a lot. The offensive scheme really helped to get him open, and it made his job a lot easier. He's also a little slim right now. he might need to beef up a little bit because bigger cornerbacks, especially in the slot, are going to slow him down. He doesn't have elite quickness. He's a good athlete, but he's not elite in terms of his quickness. He's not going to be able to get away from freaky athletic cornerbacks. So bigger cornerbacks and twitchy cornerbacks are going to give him troubles. He also needs to work more on contesting 50-50 balls. He's not great at coming down with those. And even though he did play on the outside at times, he was primarily a slot receiver this past season, and that's how he projects in the NFL, so he's a bit limited there. And he also struggles to get off against press coverage more often than he should. And this is a big thing. He's lacking detail on some of his routes. He got lazy and just used his athleticism to win battles instead of using good technique. So kind of unlike Van Jefferson, he got a little bit lazy at times. Overall, though, Justin Jefferson made his living at LSU by being a reliable and consistent option for his quarterbacks. He has fantastic hands with solid but not great skills that will allow him to be a good slot receiver in the NFL in time. He's not talented enough to be a regular outside receiver, and I don't think he's polished enough to be a starter right away, but he should get there. Jefferson didn't really play any special teams in college, and because of that and his limited potential on the outside, when coupling that with the deep receiver class, I could see Jefferson being a early day 2 pick. He wouldn't be a bad selection at 49 where the Steelers are at. You're getting a solid number 2 or number 3 receiver in Jefferson, but you should not expect him to be your franchise receiver when you take him. I watched his games against Florida in 2018, Auburn, and Georgia in 2019. And just to back up here, I saw Van Jefferson's games against LSU, Florida State, and Virginia this past season. So I've gotten through my 2 Jefferson twins here. I liked what I saw from both of them, but there are some key differences between them. Justin Jefferson, probably a little higher ceiling than Van, but not ready to produce just as quickly. But time will tell, of course. He is a higher pedigree guy as well. That being said, you have 3 receivers left to look at, Austin. You wanted to talk about Bryan Edwards next, right?
Yes, Bryan Edwards from South Carolina. He is 6'3" and 212 pounds. Edwards was highly recruited from a young age, being offered a scholarship to South Carolina when he was only 13, and for good reason. He was a finalist for South Carolina's Mr. Football Award in his senior year and could have won it if not for a knee injury ending his season early. I guess that scholarship at such a young age meant a lot to him as he enrolled in January 2016. His knee healed in time for the season. He was able to start 12 games as a true freshman, earning freshman All-American and SEC All-Freshman honors for his 44 catches for 590 yards and 4 touchdowns, including a strong bout in the last game against USF with 6 receptions, 71 yards, and a touchdown in the Birmingham Bowl. In 2017, he was able to keep it up and even win the team's offensive MVP award for 64 receptions, 793 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns through 13 starts. His catches went down in his junior campaign. However, he got more efficient, making the most of his 55 catches by having more yards than his previous years with 846 and more touchdowns with 7. In 2019, he was finally able to get some recognition, being named a second-team All-SEC pick for 71 receptions, 816 yards, 6 touchdowns, while also having 7 punt returns for 125 yards, an average of 17.9 yards per return. And he likely was on his way to being a first-team All-SEC pick, but then he missed the final 2 games of the season with a knee injury. With no more years of eligibility left, he declared and started preparing for the draft, but unfortunately broke his foot preparing for the NFL Combine. But Ian Rappaport just tweeted now 3 days ago or 4 days ago that the boot is off now, and he is moving around well, so he should be fine once training camp rolls around. So let's start with the negatives, because I've been starting with the positives. He has the same problem Juju has, where he's likely to drop one easy one per game despite making a ton of harder catches throughout any given game. He has a ton of those focus drops throughout his career. Then he has to do a little work on his route running. He leans into route turns, which allows corners to squeeze him in, and he also lacks suddenness coming in and out of breaks as he is long strider. Then for a guy 6'3" and over 210 pounds, I wanted to see him using his frame more to win 50-50 balls, but I just didn't see him do it much on tape. He can be better at it for sure. Then his elusiveness and toughness are both just average as a catch-and-run option. Last thing is, while I did see him block at times, there were a ton of plays with a lack of effort, and it hurt his team in the Georgia game when he wasn't blocking with the nastiness you would want. So what's good about him? What I liked about Edwards is that his production was good against opponents like Alabama and Georgia. He was able to go up against some tougher teams and have consistent production against them. He counted for a lot of South Carolina's production in general, actually. They used his good size and play strength effectively on every level. I liked using him on jet sweeps as well. Also, I liked his quick, sudden hands that allow him to be able to pluck a ball even if he's in a crowded space. I saw quite a few times on tape him being able to finish those crowded catches. Then he is both pretty shifty and physical running down the field, being able to create space and release against press, battling route mauling defenders with both short and deep, and also being able to sell a vertical push to be able to create room to make catches underneath. Last thing is he's shown decent ability to be able to track balls downfield. So, Sirloin compared him to David Terrell, a wide receiver taken pick 8 in the 2001 draft that I had no recollection of, and there wasn't enough information to say whether that was a good comparison or not, but I do not have a comparison for him anyway. I liked Edwards. I wonder how much the broken foot is going to affect his draft stock, as I view him right now as a 4th rounder, because he was able to be consistently productive against big teams. But he has some stuff to fine-tune, but the surgery might have some teams concerned, and it could push him back into the 5th round. He's likely not to get a pro day. I don't think he's going to be ready in time, but I guess we will see. So that was Brian Edwards from South Carolina. I watched his game versus Alabama in 2019, versus Georgia in 2019, and versus Missouri in 2019, as well as his highlights. Who would you like to talk about next?
I'm going to go with Tristan Jackson from Syracuse, the redshirt junior, standing at 6'1" and 197 pounds. Jackson was a dual-threat quarterback and was twice named an All-Michigan basketball player in high school. Originally signed on with the Michigan State Spartans, played in 9 games as a freshman, caught 5 passes in 2017, started 4 out of 12 games, caught 12 passes that year, and then transferred to Syracuse the following season, and sat out the 2018 season due to transfer rules. He was allowed to play in the Oranges Bowl game that year and caught a touchdown pass in that game, and that was a kind of precursor to what was going to be a great 2019, where he became the team's leading receiver and finished second in the ACC, was a second-team All-ACC selection, starting 11 games and catching 66 passes for 1,023 yards with 11 scores. Tristan Jackson, the pros with him, he's got a very quick get-off and pretty solid long speed. He runs in-breaking routes quickly. They're his bread and butter, and he's sneaky good in the open field. He has the speed to break some plays but can also make people miss. Austin will recall a play that I sent via Snapchat when I was watching his game against Western Michigan earlier, where he was running sort of a one-on-one bubble screen without any blockers, and he ran inside on the bubble screen and was able to elude a defender and then stiff-arm 2 pursuers before running to the end zone. So that was a pretty impressive play. His speed forced some penalties to be drawn because defenders couldn't match his speed. He has a natural sprinter-style stride, and although he projects as a slot receiver, he can play like a burner. This offers some interesting mismatch opportunities as a deep ball receiver from the slot, so expect a lot of those slot fades whenever you see him in the game. And he exploded in 2019 with 5 different 100-yard receiving games and flourished despite some inconsistent quarterback play and injuries to their starting quarterback in Syracuse last season. And even though he only had one solid good year in the college ranks, that gives some hope to believe that he could be coached up by an NFL coach and he could get even better. The negatives, though, include the fact that he did only have one solid season. His transition to the NFL is going to be a longer and more difficult one. Also, Jackson doesn't do a good job of tracking the ball and working back to the ball like Van Jefferson or Justin Jefferson. He's lacking an on-field situational awareness. He struggles to work the sideline effectively. He's lacking play strength. And this is a big thing, is he's a one-trick pony as far as his release goes. Once you've seen what he does as far as his get-off goes, you've seen it all. So he also ran a very limited route tree. He's basically running fly concepts, crossers, and posts besides screens. And he's not a good contested ball catcher. He allows defenders to crowd his space and doesn't fight for separation. From what I saw from Tristan Jackson, he showed me some big play potential that intrigued me. He's not nearly as polished as the Jefferson twins I looked at, but his speed and raw talent could be molded into a solid deep threat receiver in the NFL. His size projects him as a slot receiver, but he plays more like a field-stretching Z type, meaning he could be a versatile player that could play both positions. Expect a longer transition to the NFL, though. He only had one good year in college and didn't play a lot before that. I think Jackson's a solid day 3 boom or bust prospect. Given the depth of the class, it's possible he becomes a late-round steal. I saw Jackson's tape against Western Michigan, Wake Forest, and Pittsburgh from this past season. You have 2 more guys to look at. This is a guy I'm very interested in hearing about, Austin. His name is Jalen Reagor. I've heard his name connected to the Steelers a lot. Tell me about him, and do you like what people are saying about him?
So he is from TCU. He is 5'11" and 198 pounds. He has NFL ties with his father, Monte Reagor, playing at Texas Tech, and then 8 years in the NFL as a defensive lineman for the Broncos, Colts, and most recently with the Eagles, more recently than you would think, back in 2007. Reagor was considered a 4-star recruit coming out of high school and decided to take his talents to Texas. As a true freshman, he won Big 12 Co-Offensive Freshman of the Year award for his 33 receptions, 576 yards, 8 touchdowns, 8 carries for 65 yards, and 4 kick returns for 122 yards, a 30.5 average through 2 starts in 4 games. As a sophomore, he was able to really take it to the next level and was second-team All-Big 12 selection, as well as TCU's MVP after starting 11 of 13 games and amassing 72 receptions for 1,061 yards and 9 touchdowns through the air, 13 carries for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, 12 kick returns for 312 yards and 8 punt returns for 97 yards. As a junior, he was second-team All-Conference pick as a wide receiver again, but also second-team as a return specialist as well, after leading his team with 43 receptions, 611 yards, and 5 touchdowns through 12 starts, and also having 5 kick returns for 72 yards and 15 punt returns for 312 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, similar to Edwards, Reagor has the ability to play on all 3 levels, including gadget plays like the jet sweep, and has shown to be able to get big chunk plays from all these levels as well. Similar to Swain, once he gets the ball in his hands, he is fluid but explosive, weaving and running like a slashing halfback in space. Then he's able to climb the invisible ladder and sag balls to the high point. There's one really good one, a good play he had against A.J. Green in his game against OSU, where he really got up there and made a circus catch. It was on a free play, but great nonetheless. And he didn't have the second best vertical in this class or nothing. It shows on tape. Then with his quick acceleration and high speed, he's able to get a lot of separation deep. Then as a route runner, he shows the ability to both sell a vertical push to set up his route breaks, as well as lose coverage at the top of the route. And lastly, he uses his loose hips to be able to sink and snap off breaks. So my biggest problem with Reagor is he is not going to win the 50-50 balls or contested catches, at least not consistently. He did have that one against A.J. Green, but the fact of the matter is he doesn't do a good job of securing leverage, again, at least not consistently, and his ball skills do not match his athletic abilities at all. He had decent combine stats and incredible pro day, but I just don't see it all coming together on the field. Also, for a guy that is known for being fast, he wasn't really given that respect deep, with quarterbacks left unstacked on long throws. Speaking of going against corners, he gets stalled by press a lot more than you'd expect for a guy that was playing his size in college. He's actually gotten smaller. He went down since the combine happened from 206 pounds to 198. He just had his pro day like 3 days ago, so I was able to update some stats. And obviously, the pro day is unofficial; it doesn't use lasers, so he had a bad combine, and his combine stats are a lot better in his pro day. But regardless, against higher, stronger competition, I really worried for him in that regard, where he's gotten smaller, where he was already struggling against press stronger corners. He needs to maintain focus and finish his routes, and also he showed some personality/ego problems, letting his frustration with his quarterback come into plays at times. So, Lance Zierlein compared him to Curtis Samuel, but I have my own comparison, and that's Sammy Coates. Way too many times did I see him drop a ball that should have been caught. I don't think he has very good hand strength, and that has to be concerned. Some of the corners he went up against weren't even very good, and they weren't even respecting his speed a lot. They would just leave Reagor one-on-one with the guy and not stack up defenders against him. The speed is definitely enticing, though, not his combine speed. His combine speed wasn't that good. It was, like, decent. If I go back up, I believe it was 4.42. 4.47. Yeah, he's 4.47 at the combine. Then his unofficial ones that he ran 2 at his pro day were 4.22 and 4.28. So the 4.22 and 4.28, yeah, I'm sure they are off a little, but even if you ran a 4.35, that's pretty solid. Anyhow, as you can probably tell, I'm not as high as Rika as most. Add him to a list of guys being tied to the Steelers that I didn't like as much as others. I gave him a 3rd round grade, but I've seen a mock to the Steelers in the 2nd round. I've seen mocks that have him even going in the 1st round. But I really just don't see the 1st or 2nd round talent there. There's a lot to work on, and his punt returning was completely lucky. I don't even consider it. I threw to watch both touchdowns he had, and neither of those would have been touchdowns or even long returns at the NFL level. So I don't think he offers anything there. And he only once got 2nd team all conference for the 2 touchdowns. He had never got it before because it just wasn't good. If the Steelers use their 2nd round pick on him, I will be disappointed. He is not a guy that I think should go at pick 49. So I watched his games versus OSU in 2019, versus Texas in 2019, versus West Virginia in 2019, as well as his highlights. And again, that was Jalen Reagor from TCU. So who is your next prospect?
Last guy I'm going to be looking at is Devin Duvernay from Texas, a senior and shorter at 5'10", but 200 bulky pounds. He's the cousin of Arizona Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray, and his brother is currently a defensive back with the Longhorns. Duvernay was a former All-State player in high school, receiving recruit in 2015. He was originally set to go to Baylor, but decided to go to Texas once Baylor's coach Art Briles was fired before Duvernay arrived. With the Longhorns in 2016, Duvernay played in 12 games, started 2, and caught 20 passes with 3 touchdowns, and also contributed as a kick returner with 12 for 257 yards. In 2017, his numbers declined with only 1 start and catching 9 passes. And then in 2018, he was back on the field a lot more, starting 14 games, catching 41 passes for 546 yards. And scoring 4 touchdowns. And then last year he was an all Big 12 member with 106 receptions, which was, I believe, tied for 3rd best in the country, and finished with 1,386 yards and scored 9 touchdowns in 13 starts. Devin Duvernay is really fast. He had a 4.39 second 40-yard dash time, which was tied for the 5th best out of the 45 wide receivers that tested at the combine. And he's a former 100-meter state champion in track back in high school. And it translates on the field. He was one of 4 receivers in the FBS with over 100 receptions this past season. He has reliable and soft hands that allow him to aggressively snag the ball away from his body, and he can catch the ball in tight coverage. He's got a powerful and durable body on a solid frame, and he has deadly speed that gives him the ability to separate on deep passes. Duvernay is an all-around physical player. He's a go-getter when it comes to the 50-50 balls. He runs through press and physical coverage, and he's aggressive in the open field, punishing defenders who try to bring him down. He absolutely trucked a poor LSU defensive back in one of the games I watched. But he can also take the speed off really quickly when he needs to in order to slow down and concentrate on the ball. He can shift down and get into his curls and stop and go routes quickly because of that, and he has a lethal catch and run ability as a receiver as well. He also does a good job of walking the tightrope on the sideline, had a nice couple of toe tap plays in the games I watched as well, and had a very impressive touchdown against Utah in the Alamo Bowl last season. Unfortunately, there are always negatives that go with the positives, and the big thing with Duvernay is that he plays with almost painfully tight hips. His lateral agility is extremely lackluster. This affects his overall route tree. He's pretty much a one-trick pony. He has very few routes that he can run consistently. It's pretty limited. Duvernay also doesn't play with square shoulders. He can get bumped off catch points sometimes when he's not playing square. And the further away from the line of scrimmage he is, the more trouble he seems to have coming down with the ball. So that means the deeper the ball, the deeper the pass is, the deeper the route he's running, the less likely it is that he'll be able to come down with it. And while there is a natural regression in the likelihood you'll come down with one of those passes, it's a steeper curve for him than it is for most players. Also, he has the speed, but he's lacking the length to be a true deep threat, and his burst will disappear at times. It was kind of bizarre to see that on tape. Also, his deep route running needs work. He's undisciplined and will run himself out of the correct route, and ultimately his quarterback is going to look bad because of it. Ultimately, Devin Duvernay has got to be one of the most bizarre combinations of talent and body size and position play that I've ever seen from a wide receiver. If you looked at Duvernay without knowing anything about what position he plays, you'd probably guess he'd play running back. And after watching his tape, honestly, that's not a bad thought. He really just does look like a running back that's playing receiver to me, and he does a good job, kind of like Austin Eckler. Duvernay has elite speed and great hands. That makes him dangerous, and he's a good run after the catch kind of guy. But he has painfully tight hips, and he's short. He doesn't really profile as anything more than a slot receiver, but he doesn't have the typical skill set of a slot receiver. They're not usually this fast, and they're usually good at changing direction, and he's not. It's been said that he's a solid day 3 prospect, and I can agree with that. I have trouble figuring out what to give him when I don't have a definitive position that matches his skill set and size at the same time. He'll find a place on a team he's too good to not. I just don't know how much of an impact he's going to have over the course of his NFL career. I really just don't know where he's supposed to fit in. It's bizarre. He's talented. I'm not sure what to even project with him because it is so difficult. But that being said, Devin Duvernay from Texas is the final wide receiver I took a look at. So, Austin, you're going to be wrapping us up today with Denzel Mims, a name that I heard a lot of. I believe he was at the Senior Bowl, and he turned some heads while he was there.
Oh, yeah. He has a lot of good tape. He's from Baylor. He's 6'3" and 207 pounds. Football runs through Mims' family, as all 3 of his brothers played football. His cousin David Mims, too, played cornerback at Texas State. His uncle was a running back for Baylor. Then another cousin, Kiaris Garrett, led the nation in receiving yards as a senior in college and signed with Carolina as an undrafted free agent, I believe, back in 2017. Mims was quite the overachiever, quote-unquote, coming out of high school, having been an honorable mention All-State pick for football, district MVP in basketball, and winning the Class 3A 200-meter state title as a junior. Baylor was able to recruit him, but as a freshman, he had to really wait his turn playing behind guys like KD Cannon, and was only able to get 4 catches for 24 yards through 11 games. However, in his sophomore year, he came on big, earning second-team all-conference accolades after starting 11 of 12 games, catching 61 passes for 1,087 yards with 8 touchdowns, including a wild game against Oklahoma, where he was able to get 11 catches for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. He wasn't able to replicate his 2017 campaign in 2018, but still had a solid season with 55 catches for 793 yards, and also leading the team in receiving touchdowns with 8 through 10 starts in 12 games. In 2019, he returned form, if not better, as he was able to get first-team all-conference honors for his 66 catches, 1,020 receiving yards, and 12 receiving touchdowns through 14 starts. With his best season behind him and no more years of eligibility left, he declared for the draft. So, he has an above-average combination of size and speed, almost like Martavis Bryant had, where Bryant was 6'4" and ran a 4.42. Mims is 6'3" and ran a 4.38. So, and he was tied for the 3rd fastest in this draft class, at least officially. So the man's just so quick because of long strides and allows him to both eat up the cushion defenders give him and within no time, and also allows him to bypass and stack coverages. One thing I immediately noticed about him was his long arms. His catch radius is absolutely ridiculous when he gets fully extended, and he can also get up the ladder and pluck balls out of the air, showing increased focus on 50-50 balls. Going back to his length, though, combining that with his size, and he is shown to already be a pretty solid blocker in space, creating holes in the run game, and there's still room to get better. Then he's able to mold his speed by using in-route jab steps, as well as fluid stutter moves to be able to overcome defenders trying to jump his route. Last 2 things are that he is good at locating and adjusting to the throw, and he can reach back and get throws on his back hip without even having to break stride. So I find the biggest problem is he lets guys smaller than him bully him, especially from press. He doesn't have the release quickness to be able to slide past jam coverages, and also there were a few times he got bullied at the catch point. Then I found some problems with his route running. They weren't as sharp as I wanted them to be, lacking the ability to sell fakes and such. There just wasn't enough focus, I felt, overall. He also has slow gather and breaks from his normal stride, and he needs to become more physical at the top of his route because he allows coverage to crowd his routes and contest his catches where they don't have to be. Granted, it's allowed him to make some absolutely sick catches, but he can make it easier on himself by, again, being more physical at the top. He also plays too tall into his routes with not enough burst from a guy that has shown to be so fast. Speaking of that, though, his early push-up field seems slower for, again, a guy so fast. It's caused people to question his competitiveness because of it. So Mims probably made the most spectacular grabs and had the best highlights of any prospect I looked at because he has some sticky hands and can really dominate in 50-50 balls. But that's also part of the problem. His route running isn't good enough yet, so his catch point feels crowded a lot more than it should be, especially for a guy his size, though. So he's making these spectacular grabs because he's letting these guys get into his catch radius. So Lance Zierlein compared him to Traquan Smith. I already made the comparison, and for the second time today, I'm comparing wide receiver to Martavis Bryant physically and play-wise, as he is closer to Bryant's freakish combination of size and speed than Traquan's. I think the only real comparison to Traquan is that they both have a huge catch radius, but I think Mims is going to be better than Traquan Smith will be. I see Mims as a late second-round pick to early third-round. I see a lot of potential to work with him, and I know some people question his competitiveness, but I saw him blocking on plays that weren't even near the play, and there's nothing I love more than seeing a wide receiver blocking and blocking effectively. So I think the competitiveness is there. I don't question his competitiveness like other people do. Again, this was Denzel Mims from Baylor. I watched his game versus Texas in 2019, versus Oklahoma in 2019, and versus Texas Tech in 2019, as well as his highlights. So would you like to go ahead and rank your prospects?
Yeah, so a quick summary of the four guys I looked at. Van Jefferson is definitely my favorite. He's one of my favorite prospects I've looked at so far this year. I really did fall in love with his tape, and I know he's a lower ceiling guy, but with the Steelers in win now mode, you need a guy that can contribute right away, and Van Jefferson can do that more than any other player I looked at. I think that's a good pickup for the Steelers, and he can contribute in the slot and on the outside as well. Second, I have Tristan Jackson. He's kind of the opposite. He's more of a boom or bust type of guy, and he fits in as a Z receiver more than the likes of Justin or Van Jefferson, who are basically more likely to be slot guys. So Jackson has the potential to be a deep threat, and I have a feeling if the Steelers are going to draft a receiver, it's going to be closer to a Z, which is what Jackson was. So that's why I have him here. Third, I have Justin Jefferson. He feels like one of the safer picks of this draft. Almost sure to be a productive slot receiver for years to come, but he's not likely to be more than a number 2 or 3 receiver. Again, the big difference between him and Van Jefferson is I feel like Van Jefferson, you're a little bit closer to an NFL-ready receiver at this moment. So that's why I have Justin Jefferson a little bit further down, but definitely not a bad player. Also, Justin Jefferson's going to be a little richer, but definitely not a bad player to pick up either. Last, I have Devin Duvernay. He's a solid athlete, and I liked what I saw, but I just have no idea where he fits in on any offense, let alone the Steelers' offense. I'm really just kind of bizarre. I guess you just have to find a way to get him the ball, but he seems to be lacking a definitive position right now. Unless if he can somehow improve his route running, he's just a one-trick pony as a deep threat from the slot. And he does seem like a running back playing receiver. I really don't know if that's a good or bad thing. So, Austin, feel free to give me a summary on your 5 guys and who you like the most and why.
So I also liked my Florida guy the best, Freddie Swain. Oh, and I want to predate this. Wide receiver has been my bread and butter when doing this, so I'm going to be a little full of myself and say pay attention here, because out of all the draft positions, I've done wide receiver the best, hitting with Darius Slayton, A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp. I've fallen in love with a lot of wide receivers that actually turned out to be good wide receivers. So this, in my opinion, my list is important. So, starting with Freddie Swain, I watched his tape and was very impressed. Like I said, I gave him a 4th-round grade, and then found out a lot of people don't even have him ranked, meaning he's considered to be an undrafted free agent by most. But to me, I think he's an interesting option with a lot of upside. Not only that, but he's one of 2 players that fit exactly what the Steelers look for in a wide receiver, being 5'10" or higher. I'm sorry. It's what the Steelers look for in a wide receiver, and here are what the Steelers look for. They have to be 5'10" or higher, weigh more than 180 pounds, sub 4.57 40-yard dash, over 10-foot broad, 33 or higher vertical, hand size of bigger than 9, a short shuttle of less than 4.3, a 3-cone less than 7.1, and a bench press of over 10, and he hits all of those. It's not necessarily going to be, Deontay Johnson didn't fit all of them, so it's not necessarily a guarantee, but he's one of the 2 players that fit what the Steelers have drafted since 2007 of a wide receiver. There's only other wide receiver in this class that fits it is Michael Pittman, which you might see a draft profile coming from John on the website before the draft. But those two are the only two that meet all the requirements. I also like that he offers some return abilities. I view him as someone who could be a direct replacement to Ryan Switzer. So if you get rid of Ryan Switzer, you're kind of getting rid of your return man. I mean, they played with him on injured reserve anyway, so they made it work. But I see Swain as someone that could come in as an undrafted free agent. If he really is, I don't consider him an undrafted free agent, but I'm seeing a general consensus that he is a seventh or undrafted free agent. He is someone that could come and beat Switzer out in camp. After that, I have Laviska Shenault. I'm a gambling man. If Shenault falls as far as the Steelers pick in the second round, which he's not projected to, he's supposed to be going at like the early second round, like early, like first 5 picks. I would be more than happy to take the risk with him. He really gave me a lot of DeAndre Hopkins vibes with those strong mitts and the speed he has. I really liked his tape overall. Like I said, he has such a high ceiling. It's just a boom or bust kind of guy. High ceiling, very low floor. Again, I'm a gambling man, so I'm willing to take that. He reminded me a lot of DeAndre Hopkins. After that, I have Denzel Mims. Mims would be ideal if the Steelers could trade back in the second round and net more picks. I wouldn't be mad if the Steelers took him at 49 at all. He is, I think 49 isn't a bad spot to take him. I just think that he could be there at pick 58. It's a possibility. It's a risk again, but I wouldn't be mad with it. But who knows? Watch him go in the first round or the first pick in the second round. I'm completely wrong. Anyhow, his tape was excellent, full of spectacular grabs, and the best blocking of any of the wide receivers I looked at. I think with some work, with some NFL coaches on his route running, he could become a great wide receiver at the NFL level. After Mims was Bryan Edwards. I liked Edwards, and I really like his value, like landing somewhere between the 4th and 5th round. So ranking him 4th wasn't a bad thing. I just like the other prospects so much, too. It became hard to rank these guys. The Steelers have yet to address wide receiver in the 4th round. Edwards would be a great pick, I would think. So that leaves Jalen Reagor to last, and I didn't really hide how I felt. He's the only wide receiver I looked at that I didn't like, and you could add him to the graveyard of guys, analysts, and fans of tied to the Steelers that I hate. He's the only wide receiver prospect I looked at that I didn't like. I don't see how people see a second-round pick in him. You would have to follow the Steelers' third-round pick outside the top 100 for me to like him. And even then, I'm not really going to be excited. And again, if Steelers take him at 49, I will be severely disappointed. His tape just didn't do it for me. I wasn't a big fan of him. To me, the difference between him and Edwards is not much. And Edwards is projected to go in the 4th or 5th round. And I view Edwards as a better return man. I think that he could possibly be a returner at the next level. While Reagor, I do not. Reagor, I don't think he offers any special teams abilities. So I wanted to like him. I wanted to like someone that the fans or other people have mocked to the Steelers a lot, but I just really didn't. So, yeah, that's how I rank my list.
Alrighty then. As far as news goes, I only see one thing that might be interesting in talking about, and that's that free agent running back LaShawn McCoy said that he wants to play for a couple more years after he was originally expected to retire when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl.
That's interesting. I don't think he has much gas left in the tank. I think he should just retire, but that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't he a healthy scratch at the end of the year?
Yeah, like they weren't even using him, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, it's just to keep him healthy," but like he wasn't playing good either. So you know,
he really looked out of gas to me in his last year with Buffalo 2 seasons ago. He only had 500 yards and 3 touchdowns, and only caught Only caught 34 passes. 34 passes is a lot of receptions. But anyhow, he came out of the gate with those first few games with the Chiefs and was playing well. I need to double-check his game log because I might be misremembering that. But let's see here. Yeah, he had... Stupid thing. He came out here and had 81 rushing yards in his opening game, then 23, 54, and 56. So he was getting about 50 yards a game up until November, and then he only had one game where he had more than 29 yards. So it looks like he really kind of ran out of steam at the end there. He's probably got one more shot left, but I have a feeling he's going to be a guy that will be brought in, during a preseason if there is any, and then he'll be cut by the end of the preseason.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's going to land with the team. It's going to be interesting to see what people think of him.
Alrighty, any closing thoughts, Austin, before we move on?
I think we're good.
Alrighty. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, as always, for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have any questions about the show, please feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our episodes on SoundCloud and YouTube under the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast. And our website is strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Hope everyone had a fantastic Easter. By the way, happy Easter, Austin. I forgot to say that forgot to say that at the beginning of the show. Hope everyone enjoyed the holiday and is continuing to stay safe. Have a terrific upcoming week, everybody.
Man, stay healthy, wash your hands, social distance. Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.